Hello my friends. So today is absolute cheese making day. I have been looking forward to making feta cheese since I've been doing some price checking here, and it's getting atrocious. I did do some research and I wrote it down just to let you know how this is going to work for me and why I chose to make homemade feta. Now it will be completely different than store-bought. Mine will not have all the preservatives. However, it's going to be more natural, and there is a way to preserve feta cheese in your refrigerator safely, and I'm going to get to all of that in this lesson. So the first thing I'm going to say is the price ranges for what I have been buying. It's been to the point, and now I love feta, especially in my Mediterranean food, but it's getting out of hand. So President brand, 8 ounces, a block of the President brand, 8 ounces, which is cow's milk, by the way, is $4.74. If you want the crumbles that are 6 ounces, it's $4.74. So you're losing 2 ounces for crumbles that kind of don't make any sense for the same price. The Greco Classic, now that one is sheep in goat's milk. It's amazing, but a 7-ounce chunk of that is like $5.24. It does not go far, and it is not in a brine, by the way, so you would have to use it fairly quickly once you opened it. The Frigo has 5 ounces of crumbles, which are $2.88. You're not getting a whole lot. The Athenos traditional crumbled is 6 ounces, $3.96. Still, again, you're not getting a whole bunch. 12-ounce crumbles are $7.27. So as this list goes on, you're paying anywhere from $4 to over $7 for feta cheese. Now, I have not weighed this, and I should have the first time around. I did the complete full recipe last time using 2 gallons of whole milk. I'm only doing half the recipe right now, but what I am going to do, this will be a part 1, part 2 video. At the end of part 2, I will weigh out my feta cheese and see how much we made using half the recipe. So the ingredients that I am going to need in this, and so will you if you choose to make this recipe with me, and I did some searching on Amazon for you, will be the 10 tablet sleeves or slip of vegetable rennet, and that is $6.10 for it. Now, you get for a complete batch with 2 gallons of milk, that is 10 different times you can make feta cheese with that tablet packet. Or if you only do half the batches like I'm doing today, that will give you 20 batches of making feta cheese for $6.10. Now, you will also need, if, and this is only if, you are using whole milk, pasteurized whole milk from the grocery store, not ultra. Folks, if you get ultra pasteurized, you will not get any cheese at all, because all of the cream in ultra pasteurized has been totally eliminated. You will not get hardly, if anything, out of any ultra pasteurized milk sources. You are better off using a pasteurized. So make sure you keep an eye on that. That's one reason I can't use goat's milk from the grocery store, because every goat's milk that I have seen has been ultra pasteurized, and I'm not gonna get any chèvre goat's cheese or even feta from it. So I'm gonna have to use cow's milk, and it needs to be whole milk. So now that we've got that, if you are using this type of milk at a grocery store, you're going to need calcium chloride. A 2-ounce bottle is $9.99, but you're not going to use a whole lot of that bottle at a time. So you're going to get, again, just like the rennet, you're going to get several makings of feta cheese to use for this. So, and then a gallon of milk is $3.63. So with the amount, the first initial, yes, it's going to cost you than just going to the grocery store and getting your feta cheese. But in time, it's going to cost you less and less, because you're going to have the main ingredients already on hand, and all you're going to need is a gallon or two of milk. So this is what I am doing today. Now see, I have already had these products in my freezer, in my refrigerator, so I'm just buying my milk. Now I will tell you, the shelf expiration and the storage for the rennet, I store my tablets in the freezer, and in the freezer it will last up to 5 years. If you use it at room temperature, it will last about 2 years. So I freeze mine. And the calcium chloride, I'm not exactly sure how much shelf life that is. I will try to look that up for you. But I do know rennet can last up to 5 years in your freezer. So, and I am using a half a tablet today. So we are going to make some feta cheese. I'm going to show you step by step on how to do this. It is absolutely free, because I want everybody to have the same opportunities I have. So we are going to step into this kitchen. We are going to start making our cheese. So let's go and make some cheese and have some fun. Okay, my friends, so we're going to first start out with a gallon of pasteurized whole milk. I'm going to pour this whole entire gallon into this pot. Again, you make sure that this is pasteurized, not ultra pasteurized. And unless you are fortunate enough to get whole, and I mean farm fresh, full cream, goat's milk, sheep's milk, or cow's milk, if you are one of those who are blessed to get these, and I mean the cream and everything, you do not need calcium chloride. This only pertains to those of us who only can get the store-bought pasteurized milk. What the calcium chloride does for us is it makes our cheese firmer and kind of fluff up a little better, because we don't have the full fat cream of farm fresh. So we lose some of that fat. But with the pasteurized, we still get some of it. So that's why it's said to use pasteurized instead of ultra pasteurized. And I will keep saying that. I actually learned that by mistake the hard way. I did an ultra pasteurized goat's milk before, and I thought, well, I'm going to make me some feta. I'm here to tell you, I didn't get a single cheese crumble out of that. So I'm going to spare you from making the same mistake I did. Now I'm going to keep this jug. Alright, so we now need to, at this point, take, now this recipe calls for 2 gallons. Remember, I am only doing half. I will put the full recipe in the description below for you. Now, the instructions, y'all. This is going to turn out to be an extremely long process to type out this recipe with you. So I am going to suggest you take notes. Please take notes, because I will give you the recipe, but as far as the process, take notes for yourself so that you know how to do this. Because this, like I said, just to write it out in a notebook took me 3 pages. So this is going to be an awful lot of writing. So please get your paper and pen. I will pause just for a second for you, and I'm going to encourage you to take notes on this one, and I will take these steps slowly. Okay, so step number 1. Now there is going to be a brine, and I'm going to tell you, it's going to look like an awful lot of salt is going to be added to this brine. Technically, it absolutely will be. The reason for that, it will allow for the preserving in your refrigerator to have your feta cheese, if you keep it that long, 6 months to a year, up to a year. Now, I don't think I would do a year's worth of feta. Up to 6 months, I can see that. And if possible, I have done that before, and mine never lasted 6 months. But because of the salt content in it, I did rinse my cheese. So you can rinse out some of that salt. We'll get to that in a minute. Right now, let's just get to the step one. Step one is pouring 1 gallon or 2 gallons. I'll give you the recipe. You're seeing I'm doing half. So 2 gallons of milk into your stainless steel heavy bottom pot. We are now going to bring this, we're going to heat this and bring this up to temperature to 84 degrees Fahrenheit. I'm going to go ahead and see where this is standing at right now. This will not take long either, y'all. Okay, currently mine is at 59, so we got a little bit to go. I needed to get up to 84 degrees. So once this gets up to 84 degrees, we are going to go ahead and start our next process. Now, to do this, I will occasionally be stirring this to help distribute an even heat throughout the entire milk. So we're going to go ahead and do this right now and let this heat up. Now once this hits 84 degrees, I will be back with you and show you the next step. Okay, one thing I did forget to tell you, while you're doing this, slowly stir your milk to keep the bottom from getting charred or burnt at the bottom. So you want to keep your milk from getting any thing at the bottom, and you want your heat at a medium low. You want to do this actually slowly. So I am slowly stirring my milk, making sure it does not burn. At the same time, I'm also checking my temps as I go. I am currently at 68 degrees. We still have a little bit more, and then we will be back. So write these down in your notes. You want to slowly stir your milk and have a medium-low heat, doing this slowly. Okay, so now my milk is up to 84 degrees, and I'm going to turn my heat off. I'm going to double check this again by stirring this. And it doesn't take long, y'all. This will go pretty quick. So, yeah. I'm going to take this off of the heat at the moment. Now, if you are using 2 gallons of milk, you're going to want to put in a 1/4 cup of cultured buttermilk. I am going to be using only 1 gallon, so I'm going to put 1/8 of a cup of cultured buttermilk to this. This helps give our feta cheese that tang. We're just going to slowly pour this in here, and I am going to stir it in. Now I'm going to mix this up thoroughly in my milk. This also gives this the fat that it needs on top of the tang that feta gets. So I'm just going to thoroughly put this in here, mix it around, and I am going to cover this, leave it sit, get my timer and set it for 30 minutes before we add our rennet. So now I'm going to set my timer. And we're going to leave this sit for 30 minutes. This is going to build up its cultures that it needs within its cheese. And then I'm going to set this up to get us ready for our rennet, which is going to go in here after our 30 minutes. Okay, my friends, while this is still sitting here culturing, you're going to also need, if you're doing 2 gallons of this milk, you're going to need a 1 gallon jar to put your feta cheese in. If you are doing half like I am, you're going to need a 1/2 gallon jar. So make sure you get that too while this is sitting. Okay, so again, if you are doing 2 gallons, you'll need 1 whole tablet of rennet. If you are doing half, like me, you are doing a half a tablet. Now the recipe for 2 gallons would be a half cup of water to 1 tablet. So I am going to be using a half a tablet with 1/4 cup of water. And I'm going to add this to this rennet and have it dissolve completely, stirring it up and letting it dissolve before it ever hits our cheese. So I'm going to do that right now. I'm putting 1/4 cup of water into my bowl with my rennet. I've got about 20 minutes left for this to culturize, so I'm going to make sure that in the meantime this rennet is going to sit here and dissolve in this bowl, and once it does, it will be ready to pour in here. But this was a good time to start getting our rennet down now. Let it break apart, let it completely dissolve. You want your water crystal clear to know that all of that rennet is incorporated within the water. Okay, y'all, so now that we have cultured our milk, now we're going to curdle it. Where the curdling comes in is where we're going to be adding the rennet. And at this point is also we're going to add the calcium chloride. Now the calcium chloride usually goes with 1/4 teaspoon to 1/4 cup of water per gallon. So if you are doing 2 gallons, you want to use a half a teaspoon of calcium chloride to a half a cup of water. Me, I am only using 1 gallon, so I'm going to use, and I'm going to think about this very carefully because this is detrimental, 1/4 teaspoon to 1/4 cup of water for 1 gallon of milk. And that's what I'm going to add now. So I'm going to add my 1/4 teaspoon. And I'm going to be adding 1/4 cup of water to this. Let's see, get my 1/4 cup here. And my rennet tablet has been dissolving in its water. Now, it's not always going to say, unless you have the liquid form, the tablets doesn't completely dissolve, but you want the tablet itself. It'll have some kind of cloudiness to it, but that tablet itself you want dissolved, so you don't want no chunks of it in your mix. Alright, so the calcium chloride has been mixed in here. And I am going to add that to my milk and stir this in. And now is also the time I'm going to add my rennet. So I'm going to make sure that this is dissolved. Now this one here, I'm going to pour throughout my milk process, and in an up and down stroke like this. I'm going to do this 8 to 10 times. So that was 3, 4, 5, 6, 7, 8, 9, and 10. So now I'm actually want to break this down to where it's not moving. Bring it absolutely still to the best of my ability. And we're going to let this now sit for 40 to 45 minutes. And what this is going to do, this is where you want your cheese curds to start setting up. So after the 40 to 45 minutes, I gotta get this stilled. Okay, so after we get this sitting for 40 to 45 minutes, we're gonna see how much this set up for our curds where we can cut it. If it has not set up, we're gonna let it sit longer. So now we're gonna cover this, set our timer. I'm gonna set mine for 45 minutes. And at that point, we will be back and see how these are, if there's a clean break, and if we set up some good curds. Okay, y'all, so it has been 45 minutes. And at this point, I'm going to check to see if we can get a clean break, which means no liquids would be seeping from my curds here. So I'm going to just take the end of my thermometer here, and poke it in here, pull it up. And it looks like I am getting an absolute clean break. There's nothing but curds. So at this point, I'm going to take a long knife. And for me having 1 gallon, it's not going to take that much. So I'm just going to go ahead and pop this through, make sure it hits the bottom, cut it across. And I want to do about 1 inch cuts on my curds. You can't really see this right now, which is a good thing, because we're cutting the curds on this. You will hear in a minute when I gently stir it. You'll see what has happened to our mix and what the rennet has actually caused this to do. I'm now going to turn it this way and make our cubes. And I want to be very gentle when I stir this. After I cut this, I'm going to let it sit another about 5 minutes. So I'm going to let the curd heal. Basically, it's called, after you cut it, it is what brings the strength to your curds. So I'm going to try and cut this now sideways in an angle down here and across all the way to the bottom. Y'all, this cheese came out absolutely beautiful. Okay, so now I'm going to let this curd sit, cover it again for 5 minutes, and I'm going to let them heal. So at this point, I'm going to set this set this on here. So it's going to be about 2 to 5 minutes. So I'm just going to let it sit there for about 5 minutes. In the meantime, I'm going to get my brine ready, because at this point we're going to be getting the whey next, and that whey is going to go in our jar after we heat the curds back up. So in that point, it's going to be cooking our curds. So for a 1 gallon jar, you're going to need about 2 cups of kosher salt. If you're using 1 gallon like I am going to be needing only 1 cup of kosher salt to a ½ gallon jar. So I'm going to go ahead and do that right now. If you see the process that this is taking, this is why I told you to take your notes, because this would take me forever, y'all, to write out the directions on how to do this. And it is, as much of a process as it is, it's really not that hard to do. It's just a little time consuming, and I get that. But it is so much worth it if you want feta cheese, and I absolutely love my feta cheese. So now I'm going to add this to my jar here. And yes, that is a lot of salt. But that salt, at this point, this is the only time as you've been seeing a lot of things I do, from canning to whatever, salt is not used for preserving. In this case, it absolutely is. This is our all natural preservations to keeping this in our refrigerator. Now, also to this, I am going to be adding, let's see here, I'm going to be adding, for anybody doing 2 gallons of milk, you're going to need 1 teaspoon of white vinegar. I am going to be using a 1/2 teaspoon of white vinegar. So I'm going to get my teaspoons out here and add my vinegar to my brine mix. And you're going to also, again, be adding more calcium chloride in here. Now, what it will do for this, between the vinegar, the salt, and the calcium chloride, this is going to keep, when we talk about preservation, it's going to keep your cheese from getting a slimy effect from sitting over time and everything. It's going to become a preservation. So in the cheese, it becomes a firmer, but in here, everything becomes preserving. So at this point now, I'm going to add a 1/2 teaspoon of vinegar. In there. And I'm going to add, for a 1 gallon, you're going to need 1 tablespoon of calcium chloride. In a 1/2 gallon, you're going to need a 1/2 tablespoon. So I'm going to go ahead and add a 1/2 tablespoon of this now. And then we will wait for the whey at that point to go inside of our jar. We'll set this aside. Now, after the whey gets put in here, this is going to be put in the refrigerator overnight. Okay, now I'm going to put this up. And we're going to be ready for our cheese here shortly. And I will take you to the next step when we cook our curds. Okay, so now we let our curds sit and heal. Now this is the point where you're going to see how these chunks came up. Now for the next 10 minutes, starting from up here, we're going to do this gently because we don't want to demolish our cubes as much as possible. So I'm going to just take from the edges and I'm going to stir. Can you see how that's breaking up? My word, y'all, that is beautiful. So if I have big chunks of my curds like this, I'm going to break it down. Just gently going to stir my curds around here for about 10 minutes, breaking up, starting at the shallow end and working my way down to the bottom of the pot. Being very careful not to disturb my curds as much as I possibly can, because I do not want to make these super tiny. I want to do this for about 10 minutes, very slowly and very gently. Now, you're not going to be perfect at keeping everything the way they should, as far as the cubes and all that. You're going to try to do the best you can. Some of this, yes, it's going to turn into small pieces. I get that. Nobody's perfect, and neither is this. So because this is a gentle process, and these curds they're not super firm, so they're soft, but we're just going to try to keep our curds as solid as we can, not to have too much of the flakiness. We're just going to sit here, stir this very slowly for right now, and when our 10 minutes is up, we're going to come back and we're going to cook these curds. And this will not take long, so we will be right back. Okay, y'all, so now at this point I'm going to turn my heat on low. I am currently sitting at 84 degrees, and we want to bring this now up to 88. This will not take long, So we're going to go ahead and cook our curds, and what's going to end up happening is once we cook these, we're going to let it sit, turn the heat off, and let it sit for 5 minutes or so. We're going to allow all the curds to drop to the bottom of the pot. So I'm going to go ahead and let this heat up. Get this slowly, just gently, occasionally sitting here stirring this. I don't want to keep breaking up my curds too much because they are breaking up in here. So I just want to be able to bring this up to heat just a little bit. So I'm going to keep an eye on this, and once this hits 88 degrees, I will end up bringing you back. Yes, I am taking this in steps with you so that you know how to do this. Cheese making can be delicate, but so worth it in the end. So we will be back after we hit 88 degrees. Okay, we are at 88 degrees and our heat just came off. So now I'm going to pull this aside. And I'm just going to let this sit here for 5 minutes until our curds drop to the bottom. I'm going to go ahead and cover this again. When our 5 minutes are up, we will come back and I will show you what to do the next step, because the next step is going to be draining our curds. Alright, my friends, so now my cheese is now settled to the bottom. Now I try not to stir my cheese too much because I want to be able to get the clearest whey I can possibly get. Sometimes that's not always easy, and in my case I got it the best way I could. So what I need now is I need some of this whey to put in my jar for my brine. So we're going to go ahead and do that, because what's left of this, and I will explain what brine is left that we don't use in our jar. There are ways, so keep this brine. So right now I'm going to take, and as you see here, I have a bowl right here. I don't know if you can see this. Let me get this out of the way so you can. So I have a nice good sized bowl here. Inside of that I have my colander, and on the outside of that I have a cheesecloth. And I'm actually going to reserve this whey that gets poured in here, which is the reason why my strainer is sitting inside this bowl. So I'm going to try to bring you closer to have you watch this process. So let me get you set up for this. Okay, so I think I've got you now. So I'm going to go ahead and pour some of this whey into this here, where I'm catching my cheese at the same time, because all I'm going to need is the whey for my jar. So we have a place to put our cheese afterwards. You're going to see that this is already, there's a lot of cheese in here. I'm liking this. Okay, so I'm going to stop right here. See what this is looking like, y'all. This is amazing. You wouldn't think a gallon of milk would have that much, but it absolutely does. So I'm going to move this over for right this moment, because I need this whey right here to go in that jar. So I'm going to go ahead and get another bowl and save the rest of this. So hang on just a minute. Actually, I'm just going to put it over the pot. Okay, so at this point now, I want to take my whey and I want to add it to my jar. I'm going to slowly add this in here. I want most of this jar filled with this whey. Yikes. And I will be adding more of this, but for right now, I'm going to go ahead and stir this up. We're going to get this salt dissolved. I'm going to be adding some more. I want to add at least about up to here, leaving this much space for our cheese, because you can always end up, if you get too much whey or too much brine, basically this is a brine. If you get too much brine when you start adding your cheese to this, you can always throw off the whey. So right now we want to try to get as much as possible. So I'm going to stir this up at the moment, and I'm going to set this aside. Actually, I'm going to set it in the refrigerator. I will be adding more whey to this, so I'm currently just going to take this and set it aside. Find my lid that I'm putting on this. Okay, now I'm going to set this aside for a minute, and I'm going to come back and finish putting the rest of this cheese in here and getting the whey from it. This is where you get the old saying, curds and whey. Well, we're separating those curds from the whey. And a lot of people, they call this farmer's cheese or whatever, but we are actually making a salty brine, the salty brine that feta goes into. So, and this is a way you can make farmer's cheese if you wanted, only without the calcium chloride. My word, y'all, look at all the cheese curds here. Wow, that's a lot. Amazing. I think this is the best I have gotten my curds since cheese making feta yet. So I'm pretty proud of this. So now at this point, I'm going to have to let this cheese sit here. And what I'm going to do is let this strain. I want all of the whey coming out of this. From here, I'm actually going to just give you verbal directions on what to do, because this can take up to an hour or longer. So I am going to sit down a moment with you, give you directions so you can take your notes to finish this off. And then from that point, we will be doing part 2 on how to take and put your whey through the jar and storing it up. And so let me get this situated here. We will have a brief sit down to finish off the instructions. Okay, just so you see how full, this is my half-gallon jar, and it's filled pretty much up here to that just about bubble rim of my jar. So now this is going to go standing in the refrigerator overnight. When we go to put my cheese in here, I want my brine nice and cold. So everything is done here. This is going to start straining. I'm going to get this fixed back up and situated, and I'm going to set you up to finish this off. But I wanted you to see the brine that's now going in the refrigerator. Okay, my friends, so at this point, I'm going to take you through the rest of the steps in a verbal stance, because there's not much for me to do besides it's sitting right here like you can see, and this is all it's going to do. Now this is actually going to take an hour or a little over an hour. So at that point, instead of keeping you on here this whole entire time, I'm just going to try to, like I said, this is another reason why I told you to grab some paper and pen, because taking notes on how to do this, showing you step by step as slowly as I possibly can, you will be just as successful as I am right now. So at this moment, we're going to let this sit here and for about, okay, let me go through this. You're going to let this sit for about 15 minutes right now in the colander. After it's set about 15 minutes, they say carefully pop the cheese and turn it over. I get what that means. And then place it back in your colander. So anything that you had from the bottom end of it, you're going to take it up out very gently, turn it over, because whatever liquid is on the top of your feta is not going to be upside down. So you're going to strain the rest of it from that way. Then you're going to salt your cheese. So after your cheese has continued to drain for about an hour or so, that means it's going to be pretty much all of your whey is going to slow down dramatically, maybe even to drips. So at that point, most of your whey is going to be gone. At this time, you're going to take about a half a cup if you're using If you are using 2 gallons, you're going to take a half a cup of salt. If you are using 1 gallon like me, you're going to take a 1/4 cup of salt, and you're going to sprinkle your cheese. I know, again, salt. You're going to sprinkle your cheese on both sides. You're going to take your cheesecloth, you're going to wrap it up, and you're going to set this aside overnight for about 16 hours. And you're going to let it, basically, it's going to compact, it's going to kind of cure in its own self. Now, before you put it into your brine, which we will get through that tomorrow, yeah, at that point, I will be back with part 2 to show you how to finish off your cheese and to be able to put it in your brine and store it in your refrigerator. And you can use this immediately right after it's made. You do not have to wait a certain part of the time. They do advise to chill it for about 2 hours before using it. But frankly, you can use it immediately if you wanted to. So at this point, again, I'm going to take it at this point. We're going to let this sit for 15 minutes. We're going to remove the cheese from our colander, turn it upside down, and at that point, we're going to let it sit for about an hour or so until all the whey comes out slowly. At that point, you're going to take 1/2 cup for 2 gallons or 1/4 cup of salt for 1 gallon, sprinkling both sides of your cheese, cover it with your cheesecloth, and you're going to leave that sit for 16 hours or overnight. So at that point is when we're going to come back with part 2 of this video and making your own homemade feta cheese. Again, does this seem like a big long process? Yes, it does. But folks, when we do things for ourselves, I'm going to guarantee you the flavor is going to be so much better. You are going to have far less preservatives than you would ever had from the store, let alone cost efficient, because you're going to literally get more for your money by all the products that we have. Now, you have already bought the products. We're going through this, and you can go out and buy another gallon of $3.63 of milk, or you can even, if you can find it even cheaper than that. So even if you bought 2, you're going to come out with more than 12 ounces of cheese. I cannot wait to see how many, what this comes out to be, because I really have no idea the weight that this is going to be, but you've seen the amount of cheese curds I have in here. So I cannot wait to see what this is going to come out to. And I will, before our cheese goes in the brine tomorrow, I'm going to weigh this out, and we'll find out how much 1 gallon, just using 1 gallon, because I didn't do a full recipe. I only did half. So whatever I made with half that recipe, you can double it for the amount of what the recipe actually calls for. So this ought to be interesting. Until next time, and until part 2, I'm hoping you enjoy this. And honestly, if you have any questions, ask me in the comments below. I will reply back to you. I will give you further detail if you didn't understand anything, or if there's something you missed and you're curious about, or something you were struggling with. I will absolutely be there to help you, and I promise you. I'm having you do notes, y'all, because writing this down, I don't think there's enough space with YouTube to fulfill this. So I will be giving you the recipe, and then follow the directions by taking your notes on how to make this from there. So I look forward to part 2, and I look forward to hearing from you too. I will be there for you. I promise you, I will not leave you hanging if you don't understand something. So much love. Until next time, from Parton's Heritage Homestead.